Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Chiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Chiravanachari. Jamuna Chiravanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Parivrajukacharya, Ashtatara Sarashishi Srimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaycharan Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Lasat Pankaja Kinjalka Pitakoshaya Vashasham Shrivatsa Vakshasham Brajat Kushtuba Mukta Kandharam Lasat Pankaja Kinkalja Pitakoshaya Vashasham Shrivatsa Vakshasham Brajat Kushtuba Mukta Kandharam Lasat Pankaja Kinkaljaka Pitakoshaya Vashasham Shrivatsa Vakshasham Brajat Kushtuvam Mukha Kandharam Lasat Pankaja Kinkalja Pitakoshaya Vashasham Srivatsa Vakshasham Brajat Kushtuba Mukta Kandharam. Ladies. Lasat Pankajab Kinkalja Pitakoshaya Vashasham Vrivatsa Vakshasham Brajat Kushtuba Mukta Kandharam Lasat Pankaja Kinkalja Vakshasham Brajat Shrivatsa Vakshasham Brajat Kushtuba Mukta Kandharam Lasat Pankaja Kinkalja Pitakoshaya Vashasham Shivatsa Vakshasham Brajat Kushtuba Mukta Kandharam. Word for word. Lasat, shining. Pankaja, of a lotus. Kinjalka, filaments. Pita, yellow. Koshaya, silk cloth. Vashasham, whose garment? Shrivatsa, bearing the mark of Shrivatsa. Vakshasham, breast. Brajat, brilliant. Kushtuba, Kushtuba gem. Amukta, put on. Kandharam, his neck. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. His loins are covered by a shining cloth, yellowish like the filaments of a lotus. On his breast he bears the mark of Shrivats, a curl of white hair. The brilliant Kushtuba gem is suspended from his neck. Translation responsively, please. His loins are covered by a shining cloth, yellowish like the filaments of a lotus. On his breast he bears the mark of Shrivats, a curl of white hair. The brilliant Kushtuba gem is suspended from his neck. Purport by Prabhupada. The exact colour of the garment of the Supreme Lord is described as saffron yellow, just like the pollen of a lotus flower. The Kushtuba gem hanging on his chest is also described. His neck is beautifully decorated with jewels and pearls. The Lord is full in 6 opulences, one of which is wealth. He is very richly dressed with valuable jewels which are not visible within this material world. Om Agnatimanandasya Ganananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tajma Shri Gurave Namaha Manchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhavoyavacha Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, in the purport today, Prabhupada is describing the Lord is full in 6 opulences, and his name given for that is Bhagavan, Lord Sri Bhagavan, who possesses 6 opulences in full. The description here mentions some items of his unlimited wealth. Prabhupada says, he's richly dressed with valuable jewels that are not visible within this material world. So, the Vaishnava philosophy, the Vaishnava theology, gives us detailed, expansive descriptions of the Supreme as an amazing, transcendental personality. We read here what he wears, what he's carrying, his jewelry, even the look on his face. So the Supreme Lord is not something vague or left up to our imagination. When I was thinking about this class, reflecting on what to say, I was reflecting that before I had met with the devotees, the idea of God sort of felt really foreign to me. I know that Bhagavatam class is not a forum to talk about the speaker, but I was thinking this feeling of not having a close relationship with God is common, I think, to many people. The idea of the Supreme Being, maybe he's there, but he's pretty distant. Many people I've talked to, like visitors to the farm, seem to sort of, especially older people, share this sort of feeling that God's not immediately present in your life. And I know that for some of the younger devotees here, some of you have had much more sattvic beginnings to your life than I had. There are devotees here in the community who are even born in devotee families. So they've heard this philosophy from the beginning of their lives, some of them. I didn't grow up in a religious household, so this idea of God felt like something far away. It was there in theory, but not really connected. Certainly it wasn't something that was intimately connected in my life, like on a day-to-day, moment-by-moment basis. So I was thinking, before we question the idea of God or the existence of God, then we should ask, what do we mean by the word? This word God. So apparently, the word's not coming from the east, it comes from the west. The word itself comes from ancient Germanic language. It originally was Gott, and then things changed. It predates Christianity. The word God was not used in ancient Hebrew text, for example, which used the word Yahweh, or in the Greek, theos is used. And we all know in Arabic, it's Allah. So in religions that recognize one God, the word is generally used to refer to the supreme almighty creator, the ruler of the universe. But these are more like job descriptions, aren't they? That's what he does. It doesn't really give us much understanding of who is this transcendental person. But the Vedic literature, or in the Vedic literature, the Supreme is described in different parts, in different ways. He's described as the Purusha, the Supreme Person. He's described as Prajapati, the Creator. He's described as Brahman, as Narayan, and today as Bhagavan. So Prabhupada mentions in the purport today, the Lord who is full in these 6 opulences, and this is Bhagavan, the Supreme Being who possesses all the opulences in full in knowledge, full in wealth, full in beauty, fame, renunciation and strength. And he has these things in complete measure. Of course, we use the word he here. He has these things. So using that word invites another whole discussion about how that works, but that's for another time. All around us we see individuals who display different opulences. Someone has some wealth, some fame, some beauty, some amount of knowledge and so on. And somehow we're naturally attracted to these opulences. If someone has something like this, we're attracted to it. I can remember as a small kid going with my parents. There was a community event and we got to see some strong man called the Mighty Apollo. I was maybe 10 years old, something like that. I don't think he would cut it these days, but back then this seemed pretty incredible. The Mighty Apollo, he's got like this leopard skin thing or something like that. And supposedly he has immense strength. He's going to pull a car with a rope attached to the car with something in his mouth. So with his mouth he's going to pull a car along. And I can remember back then we were really impressed. Firstly, he was pulling and pulling, nothing was happening, and he said, "You better take the handbrake off." So they took the handbrake off in the car. But I was just talking to Rasarani about it here the other day, and she completely blew my balloon. She said, "Anyone can do that." She said, "Actually, if you've got this thing attached," and she said, "It's not so hard. I guess as long as it's on hard enough ground." I mean, I don't know whether my teeth could handle it, but apparently it doesn't prove you're the strongest person in the world. But as a 10-year-old, I was impressed. I was thinking also, I remember a few years ago, right here in good old Murwillumbah, there was some TV celebrity who was supposed to be coming to the local shopping mall. Like some TV show, some guy who was famous. And, I mean, I didn't watch it, but I could care less. But the people just flocked to see this TV personality who's going to be there at Sunnyside Shopping Mall. There were people everywhere. In the Vishnu Purana, it describes the Supreme Absolute as Bhagavan. That's where the description comes from. Bhaga means fortune or wealth, and Van indicates the possessor of that. So Bhagavan. But we know Bhagavan is described not just wealthy, but he has all beauty, all power, all knowledge, has the most renunciation, and is the most famous. So people in the material world manifest some of these qualities, but in relatively small amounts, tiny amounts. Like in Australia, some of you are not Aussies, but here in Australia, we were famous. We had this guy who was a fast swimmer. Can you remember? I guess it was like probably 20 years ago now. He won all the gold medals. He was the torpedo. This guy with these huge feet that could swim fast. But I was thinking, we forget that the smallest, most insignificant little fish would make his efforts at swimming fast look pretty puny. Some guy who's like famous, gets gold medals and what have you. For a little bit you can swim a bit fast. But like some little fish like that, he would stream down the pool 10 times and it would take this, our famous swimmer to get there. But someone who manifests even a little of these qualities, we're attracted to them. Usually people only have one of these qualities, but even having one of them often brings fame with it. They're given so much attention. Like Rupert Murdoch, you've probably all heard of him, he's one of the wealthiest people on the planet. But if you see a picture of Rupert, he's not the most beautiful. So he has a little bit of a opulence, but certainly not them all. Or I was thinking, think of a supermodel, someone who's paid lots of money because they're born with facial features that we consider to be beautiful. But probably that person is probably not all knowledgeable. They're famous for having some beauty. So just to witness like a minuscule portion of these qualities that are coming from the Supreme, we are attracted. If we reflect, where are these opulences coming from? Like, where does beauty come from? Where does wealth come from? So in the Vedanta Sutra, it says, Janma Jasya Yataha. You all heard that one? Anyone know what it means? Janma Jasya Yataha. Janma Jasya Yataha. Everything is coming from the Supreme. Everything. Even the good, bad and the ugly. Everything is coming from the Supreme. The Supreme Absolute Truth is that from which everything emanates. The first verse of the Bhagavatam includes that description also. It starts with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and then it goes on, Janma Jasya Yataha. So any little opulence that we may have is a small reflection coming from the Supreme. And also, that opulence has to be sanctioned by the Supreme in the form of your karma, in form like Paramatma, and so on. Like, if you think of, say, a famous musician, for example. So lots of people might like to have that ability to be able to play like that person. And people, you can practice. But that opulence, to be able to have that ability to be able to play like that, it has to be sanctioned. You can practice all your life and not ever get to be good like that. It has to be sanctioned. It has to be given to you. So in the material sphere, we focus on a particular human being who has a little opulence, but meanwhile, we are oblivious to the inconceivable intelligence and vastness that pervades our galaxy. We focus on some little person who has something fancy, but most people are oblivious to what's going on around them, the unbelievable intelligence behind everything. As soon as you start to look at the material world, unpack it a little bit, there's just so many layers of intelligence built in. I just heard the other day, the very atmosphere that we breathe is made of a mixture of oxygen and nitrogen, apparently. And it's in a very specific ratio. It's 79% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. Nitrogen is a fire retardant. If the ratio is a little bit different, either you couldn't have fire here at all, or we couldn't stop it. Even now, when we have like a bushfire, once the temperature goes up to about 50 degrees, trees start to just burst into flames. Because you've when you're trying to start a fire, if you've ever been on a picnic, a fire doesn't start so easily, does it? You have to get like a little bit of paper or some dry leaves or something, and gradually you can get the fire to start burning. Because there's a certain amount of nitrogen there. So even if that ratio within our atmosphere was slightly different, again, the world wouldn't exist as we know it. I think I've mentioned before, according to the scientists, this is the only planet where fire exists. I mean, the sun is all fire, but this is the only planet where you can have fire in a controlled way. We can use it. So, in the Western world, scientists have become like today's priests. Isn't it like a century ago, people would approach a priest for answers to how does the world work. Now, the scientists offer their explanations on how the world's working, what is reality. Many, not all, but many scientists claim that science has now superseded the need for any transcendental explanation of anything. They try and claim that material explanations can explain everything. Not all scientists are like that. There are many now who recognise that there is much beyond what we can understand. But of course, the scientists have provided us with so many material gadgets that we're all pretty attached to. Like even in Australia, there were some scientists here who invented Wi-Fi. Every single one of us, we use Wi-Fi now. So we're indebted to them in some respects. Actually, I was thinking, when they say invented, what they mean is they discover some qualities that are already there, isn't it? That if you do this and this, you can tap into that particular quality, that particular phenomenon. So 20 years ago, the scientists were peering through telescopes, trying to understand the makeup of the world, the universe. In pursuit of knowledge, they're looking out from the world, trying to understand what the rest of the universe looks like. They're looking at what they thought were distant nebulae and stars, looking to the farthest reaches that their telescopes could manage at the time. And based on what they could see, this was considered to be knowledge. Like, this is how things are. This is the way the world is. This is reality. And if you were a kid at school at that time, a lot of your younger devotees here probably were back at school then, you would have been told, well, this is the way the world is. This is the makeup of our galaxy. There would have been textbooks written saying that. In an earlier class I gave, I mentioned this thing called the Hubble telescope. Any of you heard of it? The Hubble telescope. So when the scientists are looking through the Earth's atmosphere, there's a lot of interference going on. So they constructed this big telescope and it was launched into space. So it's beyond the Earth's atmosphere. They took this, put it on a rocket, and they carried it apparently almost 600 kilometres beyond the Earth's atmosphere into space. So now they can look at these galaxies and these nebulae that they've been looking at, but now they're looking beyond the Earth's atmosphere. So suddenly they realise that these things that they thought were stars and nebulae were in fact whole other galaxies that we didn't know existed. Once they started looking, they concluded that there must be at least 2 trillion galaxies in this observable universe. And our universe apparently is considered to be a sort of small one. So suddenly their knowledge, is anything that they were saying is now out of date. Everything's different now. Because our knowledge, material knowledge, is fallible. Actually, there's another famous scientist called Max Planck. I won't get into what he was famous for, but he came up with this interesting saying. He said, "Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature." He said, because we ourselves are part of that mystery that we're trying to solve. We are in that mystery. We're looking out, or trying to, but we're just part of it, a tiny part. So our glorification of someone who has a tiny reflection of Bhagavan's opulences, without considering the limitless opulence of the divine, whose presence is divine, whose presence is behind everything that we see. As Krishna says, like pearls are strung on a thread. He's the thread between everything. So when we forget about this divine intelligence that's built into everything, it's what we call myopic thinking. So in the dictionary, myopic thinking, or myopia, is described as thinking that refers to short-sighted, narrow-minded perspective that focuses exclusively on immediate situations. It ignores long-term consequences or the bigger picture. It represents a lack of foresight or imagination, often resulting in ill-advised decisions that prioritize current minor gains over future significant outcomes. I was thinking, does that sound like the world situation at the moment to you? It's exactly like the world is at the moment. People invading countries, just because it sort of seemed like a good idea at the time, or because their false ego has been threatened by this other country, whatever. Short-sighted, ill-advised decisions. I was remembering an analogy that I don't know if you all know, one of our very early devotees in Australia was called Amoga. He also preached in Indonesia and Asia. So he told this story once that struck with me. He said that he'd put a log of wood on the fire. And he said he's looking into the fireplace, all the flames, and he said, but suddenly from in that log of wood that he'd put on the fire, ants came running out. So they emerge from inside the log, and they're running around on the log looking for somewhere that's not quite so warm. But what can these little ants know of the bigger picture, that they're in a fireplace. They're not going to get out. There's no way out. But they're running around, they're making their little decisions based on what they can know. So any path that I choose based on my limited perception has to be fallible. Which is why we humbly approach Guru and Shastra, because they're not fallible. In the United States, on their notes and on their coins, it says, "In God we trust." It's famous. All their coins and their banknotes have written there, "In God we trust." Unfortunately, the founding fathers of the country, when they wrote that, they had in mind a fairly narrow, materialistic idea of God. Their idea of spiritual life, of trusting in God, it didn't include the original native inhabitants of the country, those indigenous people who had actually helped them when they first arrived. They didn't have any rights to how the country was being divided up. And later, years later, even people whose skin was of a different colour, they didn't have rights either. What to speak of other living entities? So their idea of this God that they were going to trust in was pretty limited to a certain sort of selfish group. But Prabhupada used to comment on this line, "In God we trust." So he would say, how can we trust in something or someone if we don't know anything about them? How can you trust in a vague concept? How can you have a relationship with an abstract idea or a formless conception? So if the word God is nothing more than sort of an empty word, you don't have a relationship with it. So today's verse is like filling in the blank slate. Today's verse and the one before it is giving us specific information about the Supreme. Like yesterday's verse. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has a cheerful, lotus-like countenance with ruddy eyes, like that means reddish. Ruddy eyes like the interior of a lotus, a swarthy body, a dark body, like the petals of a blue lotus. He's carrying a conch, a disc, and a mace in 3 of his hands. And today, his loins are covered by shining cloth, which is yellowish, like the filaments of a lotus. On his breast, he bears the mark of Srivats, and he has the brilliant Kaustubha gem suspended from his neck. There's so many descriptions of what the Supreme looks like, his nature, his qualities, in the Vedic literature. This is a very different sort of idea to that historical standard Christian conception where God is old, because he's been around a long time. So therefore they figure he must have got pretty old by now. God is old, he's got flowing grey hair. Sometimes he's got a big regal crown. And often if you look at old engravings of what they thought God looked like, it was sort of frowning. Either he's struggling a bit trying to get the world to go in the way he wants it to, or it's not going how he wants and he's frowning. If I knew how to get the projector to work, I would have brought you some nice engravings of these funny old ideas of God looking down. He doesn't look happy in most pictures. But here, Krishna has, or the Lord Vishnu has, a cheerful, lotus-like countenance. Countenance means his facial expression. And of course, facial expression conveys your mood, doesn't it? So he's got a cheerful facial expression. Prabhupada writes, his facial expression indicates that he's ready to show favour and benediction to the devotees. That cheerful expression on his face means that he's ready to show us favour, his mercy, benediction to the devotees. But for the non-devotees, Prabhupada says, he is silent. The non-devotees are just distracted, material pursuits. So Krishna, he can't say anything to them. He can't communicate. They're not open to it. He's described as most charming to look at. In the material world, he's most charming, most beautiful. But we know in the material world, any personal beauty we have is temporary because that beauty is associated with the material body. It's temporary. The body's changing as we know. As we're talking, it's changing moment by moment. Prabhupada comments that Krishna's beauty is described as sashvat, ever existing. It's part of his spiritual energy. That beauty doesn't fade. That's part of his nature. He's called Navayovana. It's one of Krishna's names. He has eternal, blooming, youthful appearance and energy. Navayovana. He's cheerful. He's not straining to do anything. Everything is like play to him. It's all pastime. Like, for example, when he's a 7-year-old kid, he lifts Govardhana hill on his finger. He's not straining. His loins are covered by shining yellowish cloth, coloured like the filaments of a lotus. The Kaustuba gem is suspended from his neck. In the 8th canto of the Bhagavatam, it describes that the Kaustuba is sort of like a transcendental, like a ruby. It said Krishna's Kaustuba gem is unlimitedly brilliant and beautiful, transcendental jewel, and it is deep red in colour, something like a ruby. But it's described that the beauty of this gem, it's so beautiful because it emanates the beauty coming from Krishna's neck. So returning to that idea of God, Prabhupada points out that there's a difference between the general idea of God and the absolute truth. The word God indicates, as we said, sort of a controller. But Prabhupada says there can be different controllers of different functions. Interesting, actually, I mentioned the word originally came from ancient German language. And in the ancient Germanic texts, it wasn't capital G, Gott. It was just a small g, because they recognized there were many supremes, many controllers that were above them. So Prabhupada says there can be different controllers of different functions. And we're aware in the Vedic pantheon exists 33 million demigods. They're all controllers. But the supreme absolute truth is that from which everything emanates. Janma jasya yataha. That from which everything is emanating. In the Vedanta Sutra, it's describing the absolute truth is the source, the reservoir the maintainer of everything. The Bhagavatam talks about the Param Satyam, who is the source of all energies. He's not just an Ishvara, a controller. He's the Param Ishvara. He doesn't get his power from anywhere else. And he is a person, the supreme person. Otherwise, if you think about it, where did we get our personal nature from? If the supreme is not personal, then how could we be personal? Where do these opulences that we've been talking about today, where do they all come from? Janmad yasya yataha. Everything is emanating from the Supreme Absolute Truth. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the conclusion of all the Vedic literature, it establishes the material world is not independent. It emanates from a conscious source. It doesn't emanate from dead matter. It emanates from a conscious source. And this source is identified as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or Krishna or Narayan. But in like today's verse, it goes further. It fills in those details of Narayan, for example, the colour of his cloth, how his neck is beautifully decorated with jewels and pearls. He's got this special jewel called Kaustuba. Even in the next verse it's coming, it says, and around his neck there's a garland which has attracted bees to it. Imagine the Supreme Lord has bees buzzing around his garland. So the description is talking about Lord Vishnu. But Shastra goes even further, and it describes another form of the Supreme, where he can appear as somebody's child, who can display unlimited, intimate pastimes with his intimate devotees. The Bhagavatam goes on to describe how the Supreme, or Krishna, has relationships with his devotees, individual relationships, how he enters into their lives. That's one of the reasons we're reading the Bhagavatam, to hear about these amazing pastimes where devotees have relationships with the Supreme. So then we might question, how do we achieve that? How can Krishna enter into our lives? So Prabhupada has told us there's a prerequisite, that our hearts have to become as soft as a cotton ball. Our heart has to become that soft. With a soft, open heart, we can feel Krishna's mercy. So what's stopping us? It's our anartas. We have these anartas which block us. Prabhupada defines the word arta, as in like arta kama dhamma moksha. Arta, he says, is something valuable. Arta, something valuable. So anarta is something which has no worth. It's just blocking us. It has no value. These anartas are things like, they're unwanted things. Pride, stubbornness, greed, enviousness, lustiness, selfishness. The list goes on, doesn't it? And they're stopping us from feeling Krishna's presence. These unwanted things, which unfortunately are part of our false ego, come from samskaras, which means past impressions. Those impressions come from unlimited lifetimes of sinful activity. I was reminded recently, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, he defined samskara as like some scar. Isn't it? It's like a hard scar on our heart that's stopping us from becoming soft. This scar tissue that's developed from our past sinful activities makes our hearts become hard. Here's a quote from Jamuna Acharya. He says, "There is not a single offensive or sinful act that I have not committed in this world. Not just once, but thousands of times. Now the day has come when, shedding tears of repentance, I stand before you, my Lord, seeing all this within myself. The day of judgment has come, and I have no other shelter but you, O Mukunda, the Lord who bestows salvation." So this gives us an inkling of the sort of mood we have to have. I have to be a little bit humble, a little bit patient in my sadhana. If that's the sort of background I'm coming from, if that's Jamuna Acharya saying that, what must be my background? It's described in an upcoming verse that the feet of Lord Vishnu can act like thunderbolts to smash the mountain of sin stored in the mind of a meditating devotee. We have accumulated a mountain of sin, but the feet of Lord Vishnu can smash that mountain. So we're advised to meditate upon this dazzling, beautiful form of the Lord within our hearts. Apparently, actually, this form of Lord Vishnu, he can be standing, he can be sitting, he can be lying down, even moving around in your heart. Prabhupada, in a purport that's coming up, he points out that this process of meditating on the Lord within the heart and the process of hearing and chanting about the glories and pastimes of the Lord, he says it's the same thing. But he said there's a difference. He said in this particular age we're living, where we have disturbed minds, so trying to meditate on the Lord's form within the mind will be interrupted. But by sound, by the hearing process, the yogic practice that's been talked about, it's automatically performed. Whether our mind is peaceful or whether it's disturbed, we can chant in kirtan, we can chant japa. So this brings us to Lord Chaitanya's instruction. Cheto dapana marjanam bhava mahadivagni nivapanam. So Cheto, the heart, dapana, the mirror, marjanam, cleansing, cheto dapana marjanam, bhava maha nivagni, that's the blazing fire of material existence. So these things, let there be victory to the chanting of the holy name of Lord Krishna, which can cleanse the mirror of the heart and stop the miseries of the blazing fire of material existence. So in the second line, after Cheto Dapana Majjanam, it goes, Shraya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadhu Jivanam. Shreya is good fortune, Kairava is a white lotus, Chandrika is the moon. Vitaranam means spreading. And then we come to Vidyavadhu Jivanam. Vidya is education or real knowledge, transcendental knowledge. And Vadhu is the wife or the bride. And Jivanam is the life. So Prabhupada translates Vidyavadhu Jivanam is full knowledge. We're hankering after knowledge, and then we can come to that point of full knowledge. Vidyavadhu Jivanam. Vidya, transcendental knowledge. Vadhu, the wife or bride. See, Krishna Samkirtanam is the wife of transcendental knowledge. Chanting the holy names is the wife, the supporter of transcendental knowledge. Chanting the holy name of Krishna is our essential, it's the force that animates us. It is the force that nurtures. It is the wife of transcendental knowledge and devotion. The holy name transforms this knowledge into a living, daily relationship of intimate service. And then the next line is Anandam Buddhivadhanam Pradipadam Purnamrita Swaranam. Prabhupada unpacks this Anandam Buddhivadhanam. He says, Ananda. Ananda means of bliss. Ambudhi means the ocean, and Vadanam means increasing. So it's this ocean of bliss that's increasing. But he says we can't increase Ananda here in the material world. In material sense gratification, Ananda does not increase. If you want some Ananda from the senses, for the time being, may give you some pleasure, but it once decreases. He says you have no more capacity to enjoy. It decreases. It is not Ananda. Ananda means it will increase. You enjoy and it increases. So material enjoyment is all material enjoyment is subject to what's called the law of diminishing returns. You've probably heard this. That whatever enjoyment we try has this condition attached to it. It gradually decreases. It becomes stale. I think we've all experienced that, haven't we? Material enjoyment doesn't last. It becomes stale. So this anandam buddhi is a new experience. When you actually taste spiritual happiness, your bliss will increase. Even, it's described, we're chanting the holy name. Even nam abhasya. Abhasya means shadow. Even we're chanting, it's not pure chanting yet, but even we're the shadow of the holy name. Like abhasya is described like in the morning before the sun's come up, still everything's becoming a little light. I think we all experience that. We're chanting, like Rupa Goswami says, you know it's real bhakti when as soon as you say Hare Krishna, tears just squirt out of your eyes. Then you know you're on the real thing. But in the meantime, still we're getting this shadow, this taste that's so beautiful. It's already coming. It can give us a taste for that which we are always anxious. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Anyone have any realizations or thoughts on today's subject matter? Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. So this is from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. We all know him. He says, your mind is wandering all over the universe when you chant. He says, chant anyway. Your mind is wandering to the past and future when you chant. His advice, chant anyway. You're not able to concentrate on Krishna's names while you chant. Chant anyway. You have no taste for chanting. He says, chant anyway. You're making offenses while you're chanting. Chant anyway. You're not praying to Krishna to help you to chant better. Chant anyway. You often chant late at night. Chant anyway. So why should you chant despite all the obstacles? Because there is no vow like chanting the holy name, no knowledge superior to it. No other meditation comes anywhere near it.